Hello, everyone. This is Lee Cole 3, and I'm here with my partner, James Proctor. James, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really well. I can't believe it's already November.
And we are just coming off our best month ever. And the month before that was our best month ever. So that's 2 months in a row where this show has significantly grown. I'd like to
Yes.
thank a lot of people here. And I'd like to thank Gerard. And plus, we have a certain way we're making our show grow. And uh, besides that, we're going to get into something. We're going to do Joey Merlino, and people might say, "Why are we doing Joey Merlino again?" Because Joey Merlino is a very interesting story, and I didn't know much about Ralph Natali. I know that he was a rat, and
Hmm.
but he was more than a rat. He was. Every time you think that you read or you come across pure evil,
Hmm.
you know, Sammy Gravano is that like pure evil. That guy that has no remorse for anything he did. Ralph
Right.
Natali is the same way. Uh, so why don't you give us a brief rundown on Ralph Natali,
Yeah.
exactly what type of human being he was?
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to say about him, too, was that what makes Ralph Natali a little bit even, I'm not saying more dangerous than Sammy, but another type of evil is this guy's definitely a sociopath, psychopath. He's able to talk BS very well. He could come across like he's this friendly guy, but he's definitely not that. Someone that's just a real snake. But anyway,
And, before you get into him, James, I'm just
yeah.
gonna you made a great point there. I'm gonna give you an idea what an angry man this man is.
Knows
Okay.
nothing. He knows nothing. He's the dumbest man in the world. He's a liar. You listen to him, you'll build a house for him. He's a liar. He's a boy. He owes everybody. Everybody that has anything to do with him. I see him. Oh my God.
So that's him. That's him in the middle of an interview, and then he just loses it over Joey Merlino. And
Yeah. And
so let's get
it's
back
not
to who
true. It's yeah, and what he's talking about, trying to say Joey Merlino um, makes bets, and when he loses, doesn't pay. That doesn't happen. That's not. And anyway, it's BS
let's get
as
back.
usual.
Who is Natali?
So Natali's, from he's from Jersey and South Philly. He was born in '35. His parents were Italian immigrants. Highlight of his career is to me was he is the first boss to rat in 1999, but he didn't really have the power, in my opinion. I still say Joey Merlino was the power behind that, and Joey did like a lot of these other families did, with law enforcement, you know, trying to get you. He knew that Ralph Natal was someone that had a big ego. He could put him in there and he wouldn't mind being a front guy. And that kind of helped to insulate Joey Merlino. But, Natali did, it was interesting looking at him. He did, 29 years in prison. During his life, even before he cooperated. So I was a little surprised at that. But the thing is that he was mentored by this guy named Skinny Razor Detulio. This guy was a real deal. He was also this guy was also a mentor for Nicky Scarfo. So, he was more of a Jersey guy. And anyway, he said he goes back a long ways, but his mentor was Skinny Razor Detulio. And so I was just saying that Detulio had an interesting background because he also was the mentor for Nicky Scarfo. But the
Right.
thing is that Natal actually what got him into the life per se was he was an associate when Bruno was running things. And so what happened is Atlantic City was getting built up and was allowing casinos and gambling and all that. The Philly crime family was able to, get into the unions that were doing construction, doing even the the employees of these casinos. And so he was actually running a bartenders union for the Philly crime family. And so that's kind of how he got associated with the family.
And he was a Bruno guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, he is a Bruno guy. Yeah, exactly. He claims he was driving Bruno when he was 20 years old, and there's no evidence of that, and I don't believe
Oh, I
Bruno
thought
would have
John
a 20-year.
Stanford was supposed to be his
Exactly.
driver.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and there's a lot of lies that I discovered when I was, I read half the book overnight, but we can get into that later. But anyway, the guy,
Well, his first murder, James. A matter of
Mhm.
fact, Natali's first murder was when he murdered the con man named George Feeney after he insulted Natali and Bruno.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so what that was about is again, this was when Natali was started to get involved in the unions, and George Feeney was also involved with unions, and so they killed him. They took him up into an office, went upstairs, and he was killed.
And then he murdered again. It was and next time was Louis Irish DeLuca, and that was his second murder, right?
Yeah, that was a
And then-
bookmaker, but that was like back and that's like 20 years later. So that's in 1990.
Well, he took a break. He took a break from murdering for a while.
Yeah, well, he was in prison was the main reason.
Oh,
yeah,
good reason to take a break.
Yeah, in 79, he got convicted of arson. He firebombed this furniture store. And so, it was one of your basic insurance fraud schemes. And so he had 12 years in prison for that. And then even after that, he got convicted in 1980 for participating in distributing drugs. And this involved Quaaludes and cocaine. And so he got 15 years on top of that for the drugs.
Then he did another murder. He did another murder of a North Jersey capo. Joseph Sodana. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah, Sodano. Yeah, because apparently
he murdered the witness's brother.
Yeah,
I just want to throw this so we don't have to keep going over each one.
Yeah,
and the 61-year-old Anthony Tura. So this guy is a cold-blooded murderer. This guy is like, when you read about him, James, this is what the government is willing to work with. Men that have been so brutal and committed many murders, and many of these murders was done at his own hands, weren't they?
Yeah, these were done in his own hands. He was had a bad temper. He would, and he took advantage of a couple of things. One, the family went through a lot of problems during the 80s when you had Scarfo running things. It was just a bad time. It was violent. People were getting killed, obviously. Plus the government was just, the Philly crime family was on their radar because of all the violence that was going on. And so Natale was kind of creating his own little empire in there. And so, because he had gotten out in 90, and so he got out kind of when they finally got Scarfo put back in, or got Scarfo in jail. And so, the whole thing with Merlino, how he met Natali was actually when Natali was in prison for his 12 and 15-year stint. So in the mid 80s, that Joey Merlino had gotten in trouble for some. Basically, it was a weapons charge and an assault. And so anyway, they met in prison. Is what happened in the mid 80s.
Okay. And so they got along in the beginning, right? There was no issues between them. Do you think that maybe they were kind of using one another, hoping to use that other person to help them gain that power?
Yeah. So if you remember right, during that time, so look at the mid 80s, and so this was before Joey Merlino was made. This was also during the time that Scarfo was doing his thing, and so in late 80s, early 90s, Scarfo gets put away for life, and so there's a vacuum there. And so, Joey gets out, and then, supposedly, and I think even Joey might admit this, is that when Natali and Merlino were in prison, they talked about, hey, we need a new guard for this family, or we need some new leadership. And so supposedly they made a pact that they would work together to try to get the family, properly ran. And so anyway, Stampa ends up being put by the commission to run the family. And, Stampa did not get along with neither Natale or Merlino. But at that time, Merlino was Merlino and Natale were good friends. And in fact, what's funny,
Natali,
Natali,
right?
was
Okay.
saying that if I was in a foxhole, the person I'd want to be with is Joey Merlino.
Okay, so they had a good working relationship in the beginning, and like in the mob, a lot of those working relationships don't last.
They don't
because
last.
you have guys that want to be in power.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when did this beef between him and Joey Merlino really begin?
Yeah, so this happened in the late 90s. Okay, so in June of 98, Natali was jailed. There was like a parole violation. And during this time, if you remember, so Natali was the official boss. Joey Merlino was really running stuff in the background. So the plan is that as Natali was in prison, that Joey Merlino was going to take care of Natali's wife and children with financial support. And so Natali was saying that, hey, that didn't happen. We had an agreement. Joey Merlino went back on his word, just kept the money. He didn't do anything. And then, we heard what Joey Merlino said on his show yesterday when he said, that he cooperated within 2 or 3 days after going into prison. He didn't even have a chance to, collect the money to give to the family.
Well, he went in June 1998, and they said that he didn't strike a deal until 1999.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a little question about that if he flipped right away.
Right.
So you want to explain that?
Yeah. So, we know in 99 that he was indicted for, there was more indictments. So he was indicted for financing drug deals. And so a deal was then struck to cooperate. But that doesn't mean that the government wasn't negotiating ahead of time. We even know, like with Sammy Gravano, that it took some time, from the time that Sammy said, I'm going to flip, to when an agreement was in place. We just know the agreement was in place in September of 99. We know in June 98 is when Natali was jailed for parole violation. And so what we do know is during that time that Natali did cooperate. He did become the first official boss to flip, and
I even hate to consider him a boss, to be honest with you. When you read about him, he may have been in charge, but was he really in charge?
He wasn't.
He didn't seem too bright.
No.
He was basically a mad dog psychopath that, for some reason, was lucky enough to live to the age he did, because guys like that usually were taken out in the street.
Yeah, and can I tell you something but something interesting is so here's the thing we got to remember also. The U.S. government. The thing is, they knew that this guy was a pansy. He didn't really have the power, authority that he claimed to have. And so, but the thing is, the government can say, hey, we were able to turn a witness. We are a so-called boss and become an informant. So the thing is isn't the normal reason to flip an informant is to take out someone that's higher up than the person that person is? So he's supposedly the boss. So they're wanting him to take
With
out
8 murders under his belt. With 8 murders under his belt.
Yeah, and then take out people below him that he was the one as boss that was telling him what to do. So yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And the government knew about that, and also, it sounds like to me that he was preparing for trial to testify, and he was having to practice what he was going to say. So sounds to me that he was.
James, just so you know, I just want to run in the beginning of him. So the government was willing to do a deal with a guy that was involved with 8 murders, was a drug dealer, a hardcore drug dealer that flooded the streets with drugs.
Yeah.
And this is what the government does. They set their sights on one guy. Now, Joey Merlino, not a saint,
No.
not a drug dealer. Even though they might say he is, it's hard to prove that he's never been convicted of drug dealing. So you got Natali here with all these charges on him, but yet they rather go after Joey Merlino and let this guy free. So that he did 13 years, but 13 years for all those murders that he admitted to when he gave his when he flipped, and for dealing all those drugs and flooding the streets, 13 years, and then he has a nerve to go on to Vlad TV and do that interview and say, well, I did my 13 years. You did 13 years for 8 murders and flooding the streets of Philadelphia for 25 years with drugs.
Well, and a couple of points on that I wanted to make is one, so Natali was a very poor witness. Merlino did not get convicted of the murders that the government alleged that Merlino committed. That never happened. So, they did convict him of racketeering, Merlino of racketeering. But then the thing is, then Natali, he admitted to committing 8 murders and 4 attempted murders. And so in January of 2005, Natali was sentenced. He got 13 years in prison, and his charges were drug dealing, racketeering, and then bribery. And then he gets out in May of 2011. So the thing is, he was committing crimes after he flipped in September of 99. That's one thing. And then second is that, he basically spent 6 years in prison for for all of his crimes that he committed. And so,
and the jury had big questions about him because he testified in 2001 against Joey Merlino, and Joey Merlino was not convicted, but like the government always does, they get you on other charges and a conspiracy and racketeering and stuff like that. And so Merlino goes to prison in 2001.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're saying Natali goes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's released in May of 2011.
Yes.
And the minute he comes out, he's placed in the witness protection program.
Yes, he
was.
Does
he stay in it? Does he stay in it?
Yeah, I mean, he was staying in it because, but he was still trying to push a biography, which he put out in 2017. That's what I'm reading right now. Then he goes on to Vlad TV, and he just last on standing. And so he stayed. He died just last year. He died in January last year.
I want to put something up that Joey just said, and I'm not going. Joey Merlino said this, so we're going to take Joey Merlino at his words. We have not found evidence of this. But
right.
Joey, you got to remember, Joey Merlino gets documents and stuff in cases that we do not get. So I'm just going to play. The sounding here is a little bit low, but this is what Joey Merlino said about Natali and drug dealing and Natali's son.
Natale, yeah, what a beauty he is.
What he did, how he lied. And...
Oh, he lied on the case. I'll show you all that. It's crazy. He's a professional drug dealer. That's what he is. He was in jail for drugs.
Yeah.
In jail, doing, I think he got 20 years. I don't know what he did for drugs. While he was in jail, he got his son and his son-in-law pinched. He made them cook meth. He got them time.
Wow.
And then when he came out again, he sold drugs to college kids. I got to tape that they tried to lie, the government. It says that on the tape he's telling, I think, I don't know who he's telling, because Brevity were the wire, so somebody, one of them rats.
Yeah.
And it's on tape, and he's saying that Yeah, when the kids go back to college, they'll love the meth. Wow. Nice, real nice guy. Wants some.
And Merlino is going to be able to get evidence and stuff that we cannot get, or people cannot get, because during his trial, and when when Natali was testifying against him, I'm sure he came up with stuff that other people couldn't get.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is that, we know for a fact that, at least 3 different convictions over a period of, let's see, from 79 to, so what, 30 years of him dealing drugs, getting in trouble for drugs. So we know that much to be a fact. And then, racketeering convictions, we know about the murders. So the drug dealing, we know that for a fact. So getting his son involved in it, I mean,
it kind of sounds familiar. It kind of sounds like Sammy Gravano and All in the Family there. So here you got these fathers that have no problem with getting their children and family involved in these in the trade of drugs. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's no reason to think it didn't happen. I mean, because you're going to someone that's amoral like this guy, someone that doesn't give a crap about the poison he's putting out on the streets. He doesn't care about his family. Of course, he would. Why wouldn't he have his son involved in it? So, I mean,
And this
I
was a
totally
guy,
agree with it.
This was the guy kicking and screaming evil stuff to the day he died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, there was no forgiveness. There was no. He reminds me a lot of Sammy Gravano. Maybe not. He was a very powerful man in Philadelphia. Let's not kid ourselves. He was around very powerful men. He had very powerful positions, just like Sammy Gravano, but treacherous. But but the thing with him is, this guy was a drug dealer, a hardcore drug dealer for 20, 30 years,
Right.
flooding the streets of Philadelphia with drugs.
Yep. I mean, that's definitely the case. And so I just, the thing about him is that the lies that he told is just crazy to me. Can I just point out 2 small things that I found from his book?
You can point out whatever you want. This is your thing, James. You're the expert here.
No, I think the 2 interesting things. These are lies. So, and this is like I said, I read half of that book of the last one, Last American Don or whatever it is. And so anyway, he claims he has this relationship with Angelo Bruno. And what he's saying is that in 1955, so he's saying when he's 20 years old, because we know that he was born in 35, talking about Natali. And so in 1955, he says he meets Angelo Bruno, the boss, and that he drives Angelo Bruno to New York to meet the New York Gambino boss, Carlo Gambino. And that Gambino said, man, this guy, who is this kid? And they introduced each other, said, he's going to be something really big. He's someone that's going to do a lot for the mob or whatever. And so
Angelo Bruno was having this conversation with Gambino?
Yeah, with Gambino, with Natali there. That's what Natali's saying. So in 1955.
So with all these people around them, Natali, the psychopath, is going to be a big thing.
Yeah, at age 20. Okay, here's the problem. 1955, the boss of the Gambino family was Albert Anastasia. Angelo Bruno was not the boss in 1955. And so, he's talking about doing this stuff where he met the boss of bosses, and it's not true. They weren't bosses. And then he's saying that 10 years later, so this is like in the mid 60s, he's trying to say that he got made in a private mafia induction ceremony where Angelo Bruno was driven by, so basically this guy, Natali, saying he drove Angelo Bruno to New York to the Waldorf Astoria, and Carlo Gambino's there, and they have a private making ceremony, and Carlo Gambino said, I knew that this guy was going to be something big, and and they said, we need this guy to run the unions. And then the second thing was we need to make him. And then Carlo Gambino said, "You're now one of us." So you've got a private making ceremony with two bosses at that time. They're in a hotel room in New York.
And at the Waldorf.
At the Waldorf. How the heck's that going to happen? And so I guess, which one brought the kit? Which one had the kit with the the card and the knife and the gun? Do they carry a kit around with them so they can?
The importance of it. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right, James. The importance of a making ceremony could be in a basement with a group of guys showing up. They're going to take this guy and they're going to drive him to New York so Carlo Gambino can go to the Waldorf Astoria, out of all places, and make him at the Waldorf.
And when you have other families involved, isn't that kind of a family affair when you make someone? So it's just those are two examples of the BS that this guy Natali talked about. And shame on the Larry McShane, the New York Daily News reporter that wrote that book, for not fact checking stuff more. He's the one that did the Chin Gigante book like in 2016, and so this guy didn't even fact check anything. And so that's Natali for
I'll be honest, I'm surprised that they didn't take Natali and take him to the New York Commission, and they all got together and made him at the table, the commission sitting around.
Yeah, no kidding.
See, that's what it is with these people. That's what it is with these informants. This is the stuff they tell, and it's like you just said. A guy, a reputable author, that this guy wrote another book, didn't he? That was very popular.
Chin Gigante. Oh, and he did another one. He did something earlier about some other murders or something. I can't remember the name of the book, but yeah, 3 big books. Well, I wouldn't say this last Dom book's a big one, but the Chin Gigante one was pretty big. And then there's like a mass murder book he did in the late 90s. Yeah. So, but yeah,
that's the problem. You got Anastasia, you got Romano, these guys that have solid careers in the beginning of their career, and they get hooked up with these guys. Whether it's A-Light or Gene Barillo, that's what I mentioned, these two guys. No fact checking. They believe what they say. And this is another perfect example of another author just believing this guy. You would figure the author the writer would sit there and say, "Wait a minute, do you have, it just doesn't make sense."
Yeah.
Who the hell are you?
And this guy, Ralph Natale, he spent. I know with George Anastasia, the New York, the Philly reporter, what he did was in 2011, he actually mentioned that Natali was trying to shop and Natali was still in prison. It's like a year or two before he got out. He was shopping, wanting to get someone to do his life story, and was actually wanted to do movies and stuff. And so, of course, that didn't happen. But then he did find Larry McShane to do the book for him in 2017. And so, that happened.
Didn't they have that actor Greco lined up to do? That's what I was reading. I haven't read anything about. And this guy's a pretty not at that time. He was an up and coming actor.
Yeah, exactly.
That never happened though, right?
That never happened. And then this guy reminds me too a little bit of you remember the Irishman, because Natali talks about how he knew where Jimmy Hoffa's buried. I think just about everyone knows where Jimmy Hoffa's buried, but they can't find him. And then
everybody knows where Jimmy Hoffa's buried except the FBI. Okay.
Yeah, and there's another one. There was another thing that he said he knew about, was part of, and I can't remember what it is. Another famous mob thing that that's like an unsolved thing, and I can't even remember now because it's such full of crap.
These guys must sit at home and see something on TV and they go, "Hey, I know about that." Whether it's Ruggiano or A-Light or just any of them. There's what they sound so ridiculous, and there's so many people. A matter of fact, Tom LaVecchia said it best. You got your popcorn listeners and watchers, about 60% of the genre, or 60% of the people, and they believe this stuff. They don't even think about fact checking it. It doesn't make sense. I'm one of those people. Before I got into this genre, I believed a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
I would read a
did
book
too.
and say, "Wow, what a great book!"
Yeah.
And the book was probably half BS.
Well, and you know what's also funny about Natali is that, believe this, he's a bartender, but he's kind of a mob associate. So these bikers decide to go into his bar and cause a bunch of problems and start beating up people, knocking over everything. So he has to get back at the bikers that tore up his bar. That sounds kind of familiar.
Oh, that sounds. But how many of these guys, these informants, talk about that happening to them? They've all had this. This is a movie. This is a movie, people. That the Bronx Tale. That's what it is. But all these guys have a story like that happened to them.
Yeah. It's just amazing. But the only thing I wanted to say to finalize my whole comments about this is that thank goodness now what happened is we have more people now, like you and I and different people that start fact checking this stuff and looking to see, is this stuff really happening or not? And so, now we're seeing that a lot of these stories aren't true. But now, a lot of documents are starting to come out. And then you've got people like Joey Merlino that's coming out with documentation. And we look at the government the court documents and all that. So, you got other people that do that too, Jeff Canarsie and others. But the point is that people are now seeing that these people are lying. And we prove them. We pull out the evidence.
So and you're absolutely right. We talked about these guys. I cannot miss. There's one guy I want to show, another low-life dirtbag. I mean, low-life dirtbag. He used to be a former cop, and then he became. I'm gonna give us a story on who this guy is in the background. That big guy right there.
Oh, Ron. Yeah, Ron Previtt. He was another one that he testified against Joey Merlino, and I think he actually testified against Natali at one point. But the guy was undercover, wore wire for a few years, but as an informant. But yeah, he was a disgraced cop. That then, after he gets out of the Philly police, he becomes an associate, and then he gets in trouble, becomes an informant, and wears a wire for a couple of years and gets several folks in trouble. But he's another one that had a book written about him. I believe George Anastasia actually wrote that book. And he's another one that, is on the scene of, he died in 2017, but he's on the scene of, these Nat Geo stuff that people would go to him as an expert witness, but a disgraced cop that became an informant.
So is he? I'm sure he had an idea too where Jimmy Hoffa is, and I'm sure that he was also in a bar and came up against a flock of bikers also.
Yeah.
The more we check into these guys, the more it's just incredible when you start looking at the paperwork and stuff and fact checking these guys. It's like you just proved that Ralph Natali. That whole thing about him being made with Gambino and Bruno is like ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So a Philly guy is going to take a Philly guy up to Gambino. So now you got the Gambino family involved.
Yeah, and he's trying to say he was part of the negotiations over Atlantic City as well. That him and Bruno, they were negotiating with Carlo Gambino so that they would decide how to carve out Atlantic City. And that's BS too.
They should just put a long jacket on him and have him sit next to Ray Ramundi, Anthony Ramundi. That's what they should do. And the difference I always tell everybody about between these guys and Anthony Ramundi, he might be a fraud, but he's not a snitch and a rat, and that's what these guys are. And then they come out and they have the guts to do this stuff.
Yeah,
James, with that, I want to thank you. That was a lot of information. We got down a little bit over a half hour.
Yeah.
We're going to say, please subscribe, hit the like button, the reminder bell, please, people. And if you want to donate to the show, you're more than welcome to. If you don't, totally understandable. And also, we have another show that we do with Angel Gotti, which we enjoy doing. And that's called my father's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that we're gonna have stuff underneath this video, links and stuff. That's gonna be one of them. Please join our Patreon page there. We put up stuff that's not online, and we enjoy doing it. So please join there, and you're gonna get information that you would never get when you're not here. Okay, and just so you know, this is it right here. It's my father's daughter. It's a Patreon link will be below this. And if you don't, if you ever have trouble, just go to Patreon, put in Angel Gotti, and the show comes up. And very interesting show also. And that's it. Anything else you want to say before we close out? Oh,
No,
wait,
just
wait.
one-
Before we
yeah.
do this, one second. Okay, we have realmobcontent.com and GravanoCrimeFamily.com. And if you go sign, you can go sign up and be part of our join our mailing list. We'd appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And the only thing I was going to mention is that, folks, please check out our community page for our YouTube channel, because we're putting out these like a daily like mob photos that gangsters that you haven't seen before. A lot of them you haven't seen before.
And they're rare. And I'm working with this one guy. He has a lot of rare pictures, and we're putting them up. We just put some up. People love those things. So
Yeah.
if you want to go to our page and check that out, if you want to see, like we just put up Tony Sirico with his mother, and
Yes.
that's Paulie Walnut from Sopranos. And
Yep.
we put up pictures of young people. One got the most views so far and likes was the one of a young Joey's father when he was young.
Oh,
And he was
Chucky Merlino.
Yeah, Chucky Merlino. And
Yeah.
that picture has gotten the most views, and people
Mhm.
love it because he's standing next to his psychopathic guy to eventually take over that family.
Yeah.
And besides that, people, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And that's it. Thank you.